down in Cork, but they made life for me out in Slovakia. Yeah. Because every time they were playing, and I was on every radio station in Ireland, you know, listening to them. My God, I was in touch all the time. Because there were so many good things happening. I went to every match nearly that they played.
So you would be
I drove around the country, went by bus and by train and by car.
Football school in Cork City, Colostic 3, and immediately I found that the game here in Birr was hurling of a fairly good standard. What I found my first year here, what I found was that the interclub rivalry was a bit over robust, we call it, and all scores were apt to be settled on the field of play among people who were quite friendly otherwise. But still the robustness came out in the hurling field. After about a year, I suppose, I was involved at a secretary level. I was secretary of the Birr Club for all during the 60s, I suppose. Our organisation at club level was much the same as it was everywhere. Hurling was apt to be more a summer game, and the amount of actual training in comparison to what's done today was minimal. But the hurling was deep-rooted now because, as we know, we're on the borders of Tipperary, and I must say that at that time I was very enthused to see that at our county finals especially, the number of people who came in from the hurling clubs in Tipperary to view our county finals was extraordinary. Padraig Horan at that time was a little red-haired bundle of energy. And I'd say I met him first probably at under 15 level, under 16 level. He then worked his way into county minor, probably at under 16 level he was a county minor. Played full-back mostly at that time. And I suppose the word I'd use to describe him was fiery. a fiery full-back.
Well, my first introduction to Birr Dennis was about in 1966. My brother, I came home one day and my brother told me that Birr Dennis had contacted him to know would I go play with Offaly Minors in Mullingar. They were playing Westmeath. Now, I remember going to Mullingar that day, and the senior game was called off because the pitch was unplayable. But the minor game was played, and one of the wettest days I can ever remember. And that was my first time meeting Birr Dennis. He was the manager of both the senior and minor teams on the one day. Unfortunately, I came back to work with Birr Dennis as my boss in 1981. I can remember some of the half-time speeches that was made by Birr Dennis, and to say they were fiery would be putting it mild, particularly if you were playing bad, because he would call a spade, and he would left you in no uncertain terms, knowing whether you were playing well or not. So the fire went both ways.
Mick Verney was a great worker. He was treasurer of the club, he was treasurer of the county board, and he was also involved with Leinster Council. So Mick's memory is one I remember right through the 60s and 70s.
If you were looking for an All-Ireland ticket, Mick was the one man that would always produce an All-Ireland ticket for any player that wanted one. And then when I came on to hurl with Offaly, Mick was the first man to pick me for Leinster. He was selected on the Leinster hurling team back in 1971. And Mick, he remember travelling to Dublin with Mick now. He wasn't the safest person to travel with because crossroads, there was no such thing as right away. Mick just took it, that was it. And I remember going up to Dublin to the first Railway Cup, coming into Dublin, there was traffic lights, and Mick forgot all about them and went straight through the red lights. And both Barney Mile and Declan Hanafy and myself were almost killed on the way to a Railway Cup match where Mick forgot about the lights. And I think the Birr pitch was his pride and joy as well.
Up to that, Offaly playing Tipperary would have been a very one-sided contest. And in 1966, there was a great victory over Tipperary down here in Burfield. And that was a good Tipperary team now. The famous Hell's Kitchen full back line of Mick Maher, Kieran Carey, and who's the other one?
Mick Maher and John Doyle.
John Doyle, famous one. And it was a great sense of satisfaction for Offaly that time to get the breakthrough and a sense of we were able to compete. And from there on, I think that was the mentality that Offaly went out with, of we were able to compete with the best.
I think 66 was the beginning of Offaly's rise in hurling, because they felt after that they could play anyone in Birr. And generally speaking, we always got good results. Like any of the top teams coming to Birr. And I remember when I came on the scene after, we always targeted teams that we would bring to Birr, and we'd always beat them in Birr. So that was, to me, was what gave Offaly the confidence to go on and become the team they were.
Rhinos were the big kingpins at the time, and I'd say Birr had an inferiority complex that time with regard to St. Rhinos, that they regarded it as being nearly beyond them to beat St. Rhinos. And then again, as we said with Offaly, the breakthrough came in 71, where I suppose it was a very narrow win. It was only a 21 yards free in the last minutes of it that won the match, but it was a big breakthrough and created a great sense of enthusiasm in Birr, really, that we were competing with our friends out the road.
Rhinos has started to come in I think their first win was 65, 66, 67. Then the loss of 67 to 168, 69, 70. And that final, I had a great view of that final because I was on the hill for reasons other than hurling. And it was a terrific game. Declan Hennessy came up and he took that free and buried it, and that was it. The game was over afterwards. But the amazing about it was it created a new rivalry, because up until then I wouldn't say there was that great a rivalry in Birr and Rhinos, but it created a healthy rivalry and a respect for one another that was different than what had been there in Offaly before. There was rivalry in Offaly before, sometimes went over the top, but it never went over the top. And I think that rivalry, even it was there over the years when Birr were dominant. Rhinos always, no matter how bad they were, they always felt they could compete with Birr, and likewise when Rhinos were on top, Birr always felt they could compete with Rhinos. So it brought a great rivalry, a great healthy rivalry, and always produced very good hurling.
There was a robustness in Offaly hurling that sometimes went beyond borders, but I would say that this all changed in the 70s and 80s, and I'd attribute some of it to the fact that a lot of the hurlers were going to school together. That after free education, the country clubs surrounding Birr came into school in Birr and became friends in school and hurled together for the school. And when it went later to inter-club hurling at county semi-final or final level, that they'd still be contesting to their damnedest, of course, but that it never broke their friendships that they had developed in school.
Of course, the ones that stood out for me were probably some of the people that I was even very pally with when I was with Offaly, was people like Declan Hannafy, Joe Hernan. Joe, I used to play centre back, Joe always played wing back. Declan Hannafy always played midfield in front of me, and then Mick Indy came and he started playing behind me. So they were probably some of the people that I was very friendly with, just apart from the fact that they played with Birr, I was always very friendly with them. Birr Innes always encouraged hurling to the extent that sometimes they wondered which was the most important, whether it was hurling or study. And I mean, I wouldn't have seen it that way as a teacher in the school, but some of the students probably would have. They maybe thought that Birr Innes was more passionate about hurling and the results didn't matter, but it did matter as one that taught there. They always came first. But I would also go back. There was another man who I think contributed hugely to Birr hurling. That was Brother Vincent, and I think that the Birr team of the 70s and 80s, particularly I think the 80s, were products of coaching done by Brother Vincent in Birr, along with Tony Sampson and them. And they were the people that came in into the community school, and we knew them before they came in. We could identify them. And they came in with a terrific attitude, and they came in with all the basic skills that one needed to be a hurler.
We got no help from where it should have come from, namely the Department of Education gave us nothing. And we manufactured from Greenfield, really, 3 or 4 fine pitches, and later on we got an all-weather pitch the same way. And I think that was very important in the development of hurling, because it gave the children a first-class surface to play hurling on.
The difference between us and Kieran's, people talk about Kieran's being the home of hurling. Kieran's were important players from Tipperary, Laois, Kilkenny, all out around Kilkenny. I remember we played Kieran's College in a Leinster semi-final, running pretty close. And the full forward line they had that day was Brian Carroll, Owen Kelly and Tommy Walsh. They were three, like, and they were in. And even a couple of years, not that long ago, in Buck, what was it, 5, 6 years ago or more, probably, suppose 6 years ago, we played Flannans over in Nina in an All-Ireland semi-final. We were beaten by a couple of points. Now, their half-back line was Hickey from Limerick, who was hurled for Limerick after, Tipperary minor centre-back, and the Clare minor centre-back as well. They were their half-back line. So they had 3 counties. We had what came into us from the locality, and that was it, like, you know. So, like, sometimes you would hear, maybe I've heard criticism at county board meetings over the lack of school success. But the selection that we had was so small compared to what these other major colleges had. There was no comparison in terms of but we nearly got as much out of them and got more out of them.
No, the way to look at that would be that our school was, numbers were around 800, 820 that way. Kieran's had 800 hurlers, boys. We had straight away half of them were girls. And then that brought it down to 400. And maybe half of those again weren't hurlers at all. So our pick was quite small.
Quite small, yeah. I must say, there were, even in school, and again later board, were the easiest bunch of players that you could possibly ever work with. The biggest problem sometimes was stopping them from hurling, because they loved hurling. A lot of them, and as they stayed around the locality, some of them strictly because of hurling. I think if there hadn't been hurlers, they would have gone. There was individuals, the like of characters like Adrian Cahill, for instance. Adrian was probably an exceptionally young hurler, and had gone away and came back, and he'd broken a leg actually. He broke his leg, I think he broke his leg playing soccer. So it got it very difficult to get back in the training, but he was still an exceptional talent. And of course, the Brian Whelans, the Joe Irishys, the Gary Cahills, they all proved themselves after, like, to be exceptional hurlers. But there was other people then, like, who I had trained him as a minor. One was Paul Murphy. And I remember in the All-Ireland semi-final, the All-Ireland final replay, Paul got 2 goals. Like, I remember we at the time we had a great debate whether we played Daithí Regan full forward or Paul Murphy. We decided to put in Paul because we said he was a better finisher, and he did. That final drawn game, which shouldn't have been played because of the